Hi, Modular Workspaces version 2.0 is now available for Blender for 5.2. So we're going to talk about what's new in this version. It's largely a lot of stability fixes and some improvements to how interface splitting works. But I'll introduce you to what Modular Workspaces is in case there's anyone here that hasn't seen the add-on before. And just as a side note, what we're seeing on the screen now is I've updated my website store page. It's much more pretty now, shows off much more of the stuff we do, including updates. And if you scroll on down, you'll see Modular Workspaces here, available on Gumroad, perpetually, and with our Patreon product access system. So Modular Workspaces is probably the most used and most useful, from what I've heard from other people, add-on that I've ever made, because it's built on top of one very specific premise, which is the customizable unpacking of collection assets. Let me show you what that means. So I've got the Workspaces panel up here on the right, and I'm just going to press Clear File, which is a shortcut just to literally clear the file. In the Asset Browser Settings panel, which is under Interface, I've got my default asset library set to Afterglow, because if you don't know, Afterglow is one of my personal asset libraries. I do a lot of lighting work. So when I use Blender, I think, I want to bring in a lot of content from there. Usually, I would open up the asset browser in a separate editor like this, and then, I'll be looking at the wrong thing. The icons will be too large for what I like. I'd have to go to libraries, find Afterglow, make some adjustments, change the import settings to what I want. And that's all a little bit of a hassle. And even then, when I drag in the content, let's say I bring in Studio 2, I don't actually want it to be where I dragged into. I want it to be centered on the world. And even then, when I press Control-A and make instances real, if I click on the content, I can't even edit it. Now, I would be able to if I change this to the append mode. But the thing about using the append mode is it brings everything in, but then you can't edit it all in one go like you can with a linked collection asset. So for example, with the collection asset, I can move it precisely towards 0 before unpacking and do all of that. So it's this weird trade-off where with the linked mode, there's more you can do with the collection asset, but with the append mode, it's more usable. And I was like, all of this is pointless. What Modular Workspaces does is when I drag in a collection asset, you see that with a collection asset in the scene, these new options have appeared in the interface: selected only, center and unpack, organize collections, keep parent, keep hierarchy, trim suffixes, make collections local. If I press unpack setup, what's happened all in one go is the collection asset was centered. When I click on it, all of the nodes are now local and editable immediately. They've all been organized into collections. It skipped out the entire manual effort process, and it is now exactly how I want it. So you can do that for multiple collection assets. If you drag in multiple at a time, it can do it for all of them based on whatever settings you had ticked in the checkboxes, or you can do it for only the selected ones. So, unpacking the collection assets is one thing, but before that, when I was opening up the asset browser, that was a whole hassle as well. So what we did was given a couple of ways for you to access the asset browser so easily. One of them is through toggle buttons, which you can see here on the top of the interface. So if I click asset browser, boom, already on Afterglow, already perfect icon sizes. If I check the import settings, already on link, exactly what I want. It skips out the entire process of doing it manually. So the toggle buttons are useful. And you'll notice we also put a close asset browser button on the asset browser. But separately, if I press Alt and space, a pie menu comes up. You see that I can flick down to open the asset browser and it does exactly the same. Loads your favorite settings. Now, this stuff was already in Modular Workspaces. What we've done for version 2.0 is stabilized it across multiple 3D views. Beforehand, if you had multiple 3D views, Modular Workspaces was biased towards one view because the Blender Python API is a little bit tricky when it comes to keeping track of split editors, because you can split an indefinite number of ways. So naturally, using features like this splitting can produce some weird results when used in highly complex interface workspaces, which is why we have to impose some limitations. For example, you can only split vertically or horizontally. You'll find that if I split horizontally, then I lose the ability to split vertically. Now, I can continue looking into that for the future. There's probably a way I can fix it. But you can understand it will get confusing because as you keep splitting horizontally and vertically, you're just effectively nesting, interacting editor spaces like that. So it becomes difficult to determine what's horizontal and what's vertical after that point. But I should also say all of this is customizable. So for the toggle buttons, for example, if I go under toggles, you see I've got left area, top area, right area, and bottom area. So if I've expanded left area here, I can say if I want it to be icon only. See, now we've only got the shader editor icon at the top there, so you can keep it extremely minimal. So I can press that to open and close the shader editor. You can also, if you want to maximize the use of that space, you see this little number button here? You can have two sets of presets. So you can set an alternative for the left button and every other button as well. So you can effectively get 8 toggle buttons within that one area of the interface, right? Completely optional. It just gives you more features. You can use custom icons as well and choose what icon you want to use. So I can make it like a colored square. That's really fun. You can change the name of it. So if I make it show the text again, I can say boo, and now it says boo. You could choose the open size and percentage, but it's clamped to 45 because, again, the Blender editor is a bit weird. When an editor is going over halfway, is it technically left or right? So you can play around with that, and under the toggle shortcuts, you can change the hotkey shortcuts for the pie menu and such. We do have experimental features, and by the way, the toggle shift shortcut is to swap effectively between the two different presets for the upper interface. So if I press Shift or X, you can see it's going between my two selections. Okay, to go back to the 2.0 feature about the double 3D view, say for example, I split up in this interface, you'll notice that it has not prevented me from splitting horizontally in the right one. So now I can split horizontally here. And now relative to this 3D view, I can only split horizontally now until I close that, and then I can go up, etc. So basically, they have distinct memories between the 3D view. However, you'll notice that at the top, I've got forget this view. What this button does is sometimes, again, if you've done something extremely complex with the interface, split it up in all different ways, and you've effectively like really stress tested the add-on, it will likely eventually get confused when you're trying to like mess with the toggle buttons or the pie menu. To do a reset, to say, okay, just try and forget what I've done, you can press forget this view. And now effectively, Modular Workspaces forgets that up there belonged to it. So now you can start again. Notice though, now this is what's different about this version. In the right 3D view, there's still information to forget. So before, if you press that button, it would forget across the board. It would just reset back to a safe state and be like, hey, nothing has happened anywhere, you're good to go. But now, these things can be independent of each other. The reason why this is important is because I got a message from someone saying, hey, I noticed that my toggle buttons weren't appearing in the 3D view, even when they had one 3D view in the scene. The reason for that is because, again, the add-on got confused because they had, at least this is the only way this was possible. At some point, one 3D view opened in the workspace, did a whole bunch of stuff, closed that 3D view during the process, and remained with another one, but Workspaces was still trying to render the buttons to that original 3D view that was now gone. So working on it this way, trying to get this workspace agnostic behavior into the add-on, now means that it can run independently on 3D views. So that was quite an important like stability milestone to get in check. Naturally, there are likely bugs still hanging around in this. I think I might have seen some cases where like the suffix renaming doesn't always work. I mean, it did work in this case. But basically, if you do try it out and if you do bump into bugs, just let me know. This is an error on the screen. I was just testing something with the asset shelf. So clearly the old code for the asset shelf is not working properly. Now, the asset shelf was supposed to be an experimental feature because it wasn't fully integrated when we started looking at it for Workspaces. You know, when you're in the like compositor, for example, and you get like the little asset shelf come up at the bottom. At first it was like, what's the point of that? Don't you just use an asset browser? It's like this little thing here. It's really finicky trying to write around them with the Blender Python API because it's subject to change. So what I'll do is I'll either hide this section of Modular Workspaces or put it behind like an experimental toggle, just letting you know that this probably won't work right now. But by the time you see this, maybe that'll be like taken out of the version, but everything else should be okay. Anyway, as usual, I'll do a sale for this update. It'll be 20% off for 1 week. That's using the code MODWORK2. Now, over time, the places to get my Blender tools has changed. They're now only available on Gumroad or via Patreon because we have this product access system. So you have two options. You can get it perpetually, basically just pay once on Gumroad, get all future updates for it until it's maybe one day replaced with an entirely new add-on, which would be a new product. Or on the gold tier of my Patreon, which is about $10 a month, you get access to everything. So every tool. That includes Hex Scatter, Afterglow. There are different tiers of the Patreon that give you access to different license tiers if a product has different licenses. Like Afterglow, for example, has different pricing tiers depending on usage like independent and studio. What I'll also do on top of that sale is somewhere in this video, I will hide a one-use 90% discount code just for a laugh because it was quite funny watching people like debate whether it existed last time I did this. They were like, it's definitely not in the video. I was like, it definitely is. You can really hide things in the Blender interface. It's crazy. All right, thank you for watching, everyone. I'm going to get back to work and I'll see you next time.